makes most women start a business? Is it passion, money, or freedom? Welcome to Female Founders, the podcast that takes you behind the scene with women who are founders and CEOs to help you start and scale a successful business of your own. I am your host, Nagelia de Ravin. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Female Founders. In today's episode, I will be having a conversation with Sacha Awwa. Sacha is a Chief Marketing Officer and founder of Sacha Awwa Marketing Group. With 19 years of expertise, she empowers small to mid-sized companies. She is dedicated to driving growth, empowering small businesses through strategic marketing, analytic, and innovative approaches. Enjoy this episode. Sacha, can you tell us about your background and how you get into marketing?
Yes, perfect. So I have been in the marketing industry for about 19 years. I started off my career in graphic design, but very early on, I'd say 4 years into my career, I realized that I was very interested in data analysis and how marketing was performing in the growth aspect. So within 4 years of, working in design, I worked with a small mom and pops ad agency out in Washington, D.C., where either you were working for the government or you had government contracts. So we worked with the Army National Guard and the entire metro system there, as well as a few additional clients, whereby I was able to move from being a designer into the business side of marketing. So I transitioned there, and then my career kind of, took its weight and took off, where I then later moved to New York City, and I started working at the New York Times, which really was the meat of my career, where I worked with them for about 6 years. So my background heavily resides in the strategic part and building strategy for company growth, as well as understanding the full end-to-end build out of marketing. So my passion really started to explode for small businesses when I worked for the New York Times, where I supported, building a lot of the product extensions or brand extensions that I like to call of the New York Times, like the Wine Club, the food app, and then a bunch of podcasts that we launched, and, a multitude of other apps. Because it was exciting to see how something was developed from research and development, how we, did a bunch of research to uncover, where to find our audience and then how to grow from there.
But why marketing?
Well, I think it's exciting. I mean, I think there is a double-edged sword when it comes to marketing, because I think, even as consumers, we're surrounded by marketing every day. Yes. So even though I love what I do, I also find it to be quite stressful because there is a lot of noise out there. And as a marketer, just from watching TV or driving on the on the highway, or, being in subways, if I'm in New York or any other country, it's like I'm more prominent to pick up all the marketing that's happening around me. But it's also exciting because I think it's great to see, how our products and how our companies really trying to effectively get in front of their consumers. And it's very interesting to see over the years how, marketing is evolving, how communication is evolving, and really, staying true to oneself in terms of, the types of marketing that you want to do and how you really want to get out there and, be, good about, putting your message out there and, being true about who you are and what your product is. One of the startups that I worked for when I was in New York, I feel really penetrated the marketing space by really getting in front of their customers in a completely different way, whereby it was a free box that each individual would get, on a month-to-month basis. So we worked with a lot of CPG companies, consumer packaged good companies, where, they would give us samples. And we had a database by the time I left of 6 million people, where, let's say, they were looking for, somebody that had brown hair with blue eyes, had, 3 kids under the age of 6, had a dog and a cat, and so on and so forth. So depending on the products that we worked with, X person would receive 3 samples, or X person would receive 7 samples. So this was yet another way to just put samples in front of your customer base and hyper target for them to get used to it. So it was a way in which companies could also test products before they went out into market. But I thought it was ingenious because they were actually physically being able to experience them. So, my love and passion really grew, as I mentioned, when I worked for the New York Times to really support, that small business or that startup and that growth. But it's really, finding the niche in terms of, how do we really educate our founders or whoever is working at the company to really truly understand, other than just saying, this is my budget, I need to get to this point. How do I get there? So when I work with clients, for the most part, it's really joining forces with them as a partner to kind of build their trajectory. And what I'm finding, specifically more so in the last couple of years is that founders want to know what's happening with their money versus, just saying, take my $10,000 or, $2,000 and do what you will, just bring me leads. So that's really something that I like to do, is not just support them in the sense of growth, but also educate them and get them to understand, at least at a high level, to think like a marketer as well.
Marketers. So now you decided to leave your full-time job in the corporate world and start on your own.
Yes.
Why did you make that decision?
So I moved from New York City, where the consumer packaged goods company was the last company I was working with, and I, as I started to move into startup companies and to really kind of roll up my sleeves and really support them in their passion and their growth. The last startup that I worked for was a food tech company here in South Florida, in Miami, Florida. And, unfortunately, they didn't get through, their Series A funding. And so then they had to let a bunch of us go. So I really started to decide and, to think about, I could do this, in terms of supporting not just one client, but I can support multiple clients. I mean, my true goal is to really hit the nail and be able to get in touch with as many, or in front of as many small business owners, to really support them. Because what has happened and what I've seen in the industry is that a lot of these small business owners have no clue what marketing is, don't even know where to start. They create a business plan, but it's, where do I even begin? And a lot of the times they just think digital marketing, or they just think email marketing, and then they forget, well, is my foundation in a good place? Or, am I equipped to be able to spend money? Because if I'm spending like even a couple of $100 and people are landing on my page, am I communicating what my product is accurately and, correctly for somebody to be able to convert and want to learn more? So it's really, in an underlying sense, wanting to support that small business and that growth, to really see them, and their fruits of their labor kind of push through. Because I've seen it and I've worked with a lot of founders, now I just want to do it on scale and really grow with them at the same time.
You really love doing this, don't you?
Yeah. I do, but with everything, it's always, as a business owner, as I'm sure a lot of business owners will go through this, when they initially start, it's the peaks and the valleys, right? And so I think a lot of the times it's never going to be a consistent peak. There's always going to be peaks and valleys, and we're problem solving every day. And a lot of business owners that start businesses are solving for a problem that is out there to kind of support. And I think one of the biggest problems that I am supporting and penetrating is not having business owners waste their money on agencies where they're spending maybe $5,000 a month when other companies are spending $10,000, and they're not getting the support that they need, and their money is just getting wasted. I can't see that happen, and I don't want to see that happen anymore, because we need small businesses, in our country, and we need them to continue to flourish. And we saw that during COVID, and I think that, while a lot of people think, marketing is the first thing that they want to give up, it should be the last thing that they give up in times of, an economic slowdown, or, as they say, we've been in a recession for X amount of months. And I think a lot of us are maybe feeling things that are becoming a little more constricting now in the summer. But it's, revenue still needs to happen and growth needs to happen. So it's maybe not a complete halt, but maybe it's just, where do we focus, our concentration to continue our growth? And then when things get into a better place, how do we supersede that?
So now, what is leading marketing agency all about?
What is the marketing agency all about?
Yes.
So it's funny that you asked that, because as I'm going through, a few kind of adjustments and changes and looking at what other agencies are doing out there, I really want to be able to, to turn this into a tech company where it's not a lot of agencies that you go to, it's customized pricing, right?
Yes.
But I want to be able to understand the needs of these small business owners and really kind of tackle what is the most effective kind of drive forward, and to be able to utilize that as in, you come in, you spend X amount, you get ROI on X amount. So it's really being able to grow that. But there are a lot of instances where that is one piece of the pie, but then also strategically understanding, is my brand in a good place, or, needing to optimize the website, which is always going to be on a customized level. But there are things that are going to be turnkey. And a lot of, how I like to approach marketing is very compartmentalized in three necessary compartments. And the first compartment is understanding your foundation. And that goes back to, whether you do have a website or you don't have a website, making sure that, you build that website. Is the website in a good place? Is my copy in a good place? I always stress to small business owners, specifically if they're local or even if they're not local, to invest in SEO, because that is going to be the fruit that keeps on giving on an ongoing basis if you start early. Because it is something that takes a little longer to build up, you want to start early to make sure that you kind of get the most impact, right off the bat. And then it's really ensuring that all of your marketing tools are connected. And when I say connected, it's like, is your website form connected to your email system or your, customer relations management system? Are you switched on to your analytics so that you can, then start to see, what is really happening with things that I'm, putting out there. So that's really building the house, or the foundation, as I like to call it. And then it's understanding, how do I go from here, and how do I grow? So it's really building the list to sell to the list, as I like to say. So every marketing that you do is building a list into your funnel and system, because, Joe Smith is not going to come in maybe and purchase right off the bat. And that's dependent. Are you a B2B, or are you a B2C? Are you selling swimsuits, or are you selling a service? Because sometimes the purchasing duration is a lot shorter for some and is a lot longer for others, depending on the industry that you're in. So it's understanding that cyclical cycle as to, what is your cycle? What is the sales cycle? When would somebody actually convert from the minute that they see your brand and they experience their brand, and how do they go through the process? So really foundationally, it's understanding that. It's understanding whether digital marketing is going to be fruitful for you, or if you actually need to go out and create relationships within your community, for example. I mean, I had a woman that was selling insurance, and really she wanted to target, single moms. And I said, running Facebook ads is going to be a waste of money. You need to get involved in your community. And she did. And the second she started to get involved in her community, build relationships, meet other people, was when she started to get referrals. So sometimes referrals can be the best thing for you, similar to a medical facility that I work with. Referrals are their best, lead generation versus running Facebook ads, right? So it's just really dependent on, where your audience is and how do we find you. And the last bucket is the digital, is not the digital, but it's the analytics. So prior to running at everything, you kind of want to do a little bit of like back of the napkin calculation in terms of, this is where I want to be every quarter, and this is where I want to be at every year. And then going back to saying, I have X amount of budget to spend. Are we actually going to get there? So it's realistically understanding, based on your budget and your goal, how much you need to invest. And, then all of the marketing is going to help us understand, what is that cost per lead? How much does it take for us to acquire somebody in through the funnel? And, looking at all of those numbers to ensure that we have everything in place to be set up. And then it really is like a rinse and repeat, if you will. And then it's all about testing and learning and understanding what's working and what's not working, and what is working. We put more spend towards that. What isn't working, we kind of take a step back from it and kind of push it off to the side.
Would you say that focusing on the tech part, that's what set you apart from other marketing agency out there?
I think what I'm trying to do is to really, bucket the way I work with somebody. So even if I do come in and somebody is just interested in kind of running a campaign, I still want to go back and do a little bit of an audit, right? So I still want to take 10 steps back and say, let's just make sure before we spend your marketing dollars that you are actually in a good place for conversion. Because at the end of the day, we can always blame it on the creative didn't work, the content wasn't working, and so on and so forth. But it could actually be that once somebody saw your creative and landed on your website, that they didn't see a connection between the two, for example. So we just need to make sure that a brand is communicating accurately and simply in terms of what their brand is, so that we can ensure the highest conversion. So that's really how I'm trying to set myself apart. And I'm really trying to zero in and focus on, tactically coming in and compartmentalizing the way we work versus, and taking the time out of, things that, are more long term, but really kind of having more short and concise like build out so that it's quicker to market. It's more fast, effective, and efficient in terms of the way we're working.
So now after COVID, during COVID, a lot of companies get hit from profit to non-profit. So now do you feel like marketing is one of the number one thing at this point to help companies with growth, build the growth again?
Yes, and I think a lot of small businesses I think fear when they think of marketing is that they're always going to need a big budget, right? And I
Yes.
think that also needs to be taken out of, and I think that's why a lot of like companies, stop doing marketing when, there's like an economical downturn or, just, maybe there's not as much ROI in terms of a person's business, but it really is how do we drop, shift, and kind of change the perspective in terms of our outreach? Because the simplest things can convert more clients, right? And it doesn't need to be spending X amount in digital marketing, but I think that communication is key, right? I mean, it's like, for example, let's think about the medical industry, right? So what is happening to a lot of the doctors out there? They're becoming influencers in the space nowadays. So
Yes.
a lot of them are becoming, social media TikTokers or Instagrammers, and they're really communicating out in terms of what they're doing, why they're doing it, or they're breaking down the myths and the truths about certain things because social media in so many ways is good, but in terms of a lot of other things, there's a lot of manipulation with, influencers that are out there that don't maybe have the science-backed based knowledge when it comes to certain things, especially the medical industry. And I think what's great about having doctors online is really kind of being able to separate them from an influencer who maybe doesn't have the education or the background, right? Now you can take an influencer and you can take a doctor and you can combine the conversation and you can kind of push the information to that influencer space, which I think is amazing, But I think that, nowadays we need to kind of, support, as I mentioned, when it comes to marketing or pushing awareness is what is the myths and the truths about certain things and kind of really breaking down that wall, because I think what's happening with marketing is that we're moving in a direction where a lot of people are getting misinformed about a lot of things, and that's really not the direction that we should be going in, specifically as it relates to like the medical industry, or maybe if it's like a product that you're buying, or as women we go through so many different like creams and hair products where we would just love for somebody to kind of resonate and connect with us. And I think that's really what's important, is really connecting your brand to the right audience. And how do you do that? And knowing that it doesn't have to be something that costs a lot, but knowing that it just has to be the right message put in front of the right audience.
So now you want to just focus just with small businesses. You don't want to help corporations and big
The,
corporations or
the
anything like that.
Yeah, the highest that I will go is like a mid-level size company. So let's say, like one of the clients that I work with has been in business for 20 years. I would consider them to be a mid-sized company, right? But obviously they started 20 years ago and they were a startup, and, I'm helping them as like a fractional chief marketing officer, and they have somebody in place to do their social media, and then they'll grow along the way. So even though they're like small to mid-size at the end of the day, like, they keep their marketing very, how should I say, small and concise in terms of what their needs are, and then kind of build from there. Yeah, I mean, I think that, I could go out and I could work and, get one corporation, but I think I'd rather really focus on the startups to small to mid-size and maybe get them to becoming corporations one day. But I think it's the underbelly of, who we are as a country that really, if we can really truly support the small businesses and the startups to really effectively, kind of help them take off, I think it's beneficial for all of us at the end of the day.
A lot of, I think that small businesses play a bigger role into our community compared to big corporations at the end of the day. So we really actually need them. And it's kind of sad, during COVID, a lot of them had to close their doors because they had no choice. And it was sad also to see all the funding is going to the people that actually doesn't really need. I'm not saying they don't need it, but I think they can survive without it. Compared to small businesses, they actually needed that funding to stay open.
Yeah. But if you think about the small businesses that survived, it's, and this is like a testament, and it doesn't necessarily have to weigh like on marketing, but it's like, it goes back to like what I also do is support from a business development standpoint, right? Because it's like, I also want to understand the customer journey of your client. Okay, customer X either comes into your brick and mortar or comes into your restaurant or comes into your medical facility. What is their experience throughout their journey? And then how can we make this customer to keep coming back to experience more of your product or your service and so on? So like when we think about, and we look at the crisis, I think more heavily like in a city like New York, where there are really so many restaurants that had to shut down, but the ones that didn't shut down, like did some really interesting things by pivoting, right? I mean, there was like, maybe let's say a Mexican restaurant that had great margaritas, how were they able to, ensure that those margaritas were still enjoyed in somebody's house? And it's like, it boils down to communication. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's like, it's tapping into the mindset and kind of creating a little bit of a gap that, okay, it's COVID, everybody's stuck at home. How can I entertain them with my product and service? And how can I make their day that much better? And then communicating that and finding the channels, whether it's email, whether it's social, whether it's picking up the phone and calling them and letting them know about a new thing that you're doing, is really what's going to push people to say, oh my gosh, I want that, or I want to be a part of that, and to either come back and experience or, purchase from you. So it's really shifting the mindset of, how do I go from here as a business, and how do I cater to what's happening right now and move forward?
But with everything that's just been happening, scams and all this thing, do you think that email marketing, also phone call marketing, still working these days?
Yeah, and a lot of data is showing it's working, but you have to provide me something of value. So, we as consumers sign up to a bunch of emails, we get a lot of phone calls, and a lot of the times I think because I've walked a mile in a salesperson's shoes and I know what it takes to do cold calling and cold outreach, I will always listen to what somebody has to offer. But at the end of the day, if you're going to send me an email that pertains to something, what is the value that I'm getting out of your offering? And that's what consumers are looking for. It's not just, hi, how are you? This is something that we're doing. If it's just an update that has no value to me, it really is a need to be curated towards like who your audience is. So if you are a business that is building out your list, you need to understand and how to slice and dice that list and communicate appropriately to them. Like, for example, and I go back to the medical facility, we have a variety of different offerings and services. How do I then go in and slice and dice that list to say, okay, if patient X came in through this service, how can I linearly think that they're going to be interested in this and this and this service for me to let them know we have a special offer, or because you're a valued patient, come in and try this at a certain discount and so on. But if we just send communication out to the full list continuously, it's going to be of no value, because maybe somebody at 65, who's doing a particular service may not be interested to do, physical therapy with weights or something like that, right? So it's really you have to understand who your audience is, and you have to curate your message to the audience and not just blast out emails continuously.
So pretty much in another way, break it down to maybe one service might go to one and the other service go to another kind of bridge between different type of clients, the two of them, or even different, maybe you have 10 different type of clients that you're reaching out to, but it's different products. It's not the same thing.
Exactly. So you have to know, where is the cross-selling happening? And then where do I upsell? I mean, even when I was working at the New York Times, we had so many products and services and offerings, but not everybody was going to be interested in, getting news about the cooking app versus somebody who signed up to a particular app. Or if somebody came in through the subscription through a wine club, would they be interested in this? And so then it's really just kind of formulating this cloud of like products and services and offerings and seeing where people fit in each bucket. So you also don't overwhelm them, but you kind of allow them to feel like they're curating the way they want to receive information from you. So that's also very important.
So now, Sacha, how can someone figure out what clients want? Which one wants what? How do they figure that out?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, and it's really looking down to, the data at the end of the day. It's like you obviously are creating a product or a service for a certain segment of an audience. So already then I guess a lot of people don't necessarily do this when they're building their business, but there should be a level of market research, first of all, to understand the gap in the market in terms of why you are creating, either the product or the service that you're creating, right? And then it's really going from there. It's knowing, what is the gap in the market? Who is my audience? Who am I penetrating? And then it's creating what's called an ideal customer profile, like we like to call in the industry, an ICP. And you as a business could have more than just one ICP. You don't necessarily have to have all ICPs. And so a lot of business owners will know from a high level what their ICP is, but then we can also break down, and say, okay, this is your main ideal customer profile, but you could also have segments. And so it's really looking to see what is the market telling us, what is the product you're offering, and then we build it, and then we test it, and we see who it's actually working with. And sometimes with the test, we may completely find a different audience that starts to funnel in through that we would have never thought. And that's just an exciting piece of like testing and learning with marketing as well.
Marketing is fun. I can see why you love it so much. So now, how can someone reach out to you for your services?
Yeah, so my website is my first and last name. So it's Sacha, SAC as in Charlie, HA, and then last name AWWA.com. And you can find my contact information listed on the website, or you can fill out a form. And I'll be sure to get that and be able to reach back out to you as well.
So now, I know you provide the service, but do you also teach it to them as to your client as well?
Yes, I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's an educational, experience in terms of what I'm helping with. I mean, some clients are like, just support me in getting me here, and then what I like to do is break down on a month-to-month basis in terms of what is marketing doing and why is marketing doing what they're doing, so that they can understand everything that we're doing, because there needs to be a level of education. I mean, some clients will want to dig in a little more and some clients will not. But I mean, currently I don't have any courses set up to teach small businesses. But as I work with them, I'm kind of like an inside-outside partner to be able to support them. But I am writing a book that will eventually be sort of, the toolbox to marketing. So at a high level, they're entrepreneurs, but have the ability to think like a marketer at the end of the day.
So when is the book coming out?
Hopefully next year.
So how do I get a quick peek of the book?
Writing a book is a labor of love, so I can kind of break down a little bit of what my website, contains is in a nutshell, how I'm going to break out, the offerings in terms of, the three buckets that I talked about in the beginning, the building your foundation, knowing which channels to go after, and then how to look at your analytics and optimize it. So a lot of also what the book is going to have is downloadables for people to be able to get a jump start to creatively put things down on paper so that they can go through the exercise. Because I think if business owners kind of take the lead and, do a little bit of the work, they can kind of understand, okay, I know where this process is going. Because as marketers, we need the support of the business owner to help us download the information of what's in their mind and then to kind of translate that into marketing. So that's why it needs to be a partnership and kind of an ebb and flow of, I educate them, they educate me about their business, and then I translate that into what is marketing and how I can help them grow.
So before I let you go, I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for entrepreneurs and small business owners who are looking to improve the marketing effort?
What advice do I have? I think if you are an entrepreneur or business owner that's getting ready to start, I think as you're building your business plan, marketing needs to be part of that. So that is going to be one of my downloadables, where it is thinking about who your audience is, telling your story, getting your foundation and your house in shape, looking at some of the tools that are out there and, seeking out advice so that you're not jumping on multiple tools, where you can actually consolidate maybe and just utilize one tool for everything and all your needs. If you are a company or an entrepreneur that's been in business and you're kind of stuck in a rut, it is the concept, what I like to do and how I mentioned, of looking into taking a few steps back and, having someone like me do an audit of the business to understand where you are currently today and why things are not moving and how things can shift. And that's why I like to position myself as not just a marketer, but somebody who can help support, because I will understand product development or service development to see how can we push your service offering and your product forward that can support your marketing and your growth. Because companies will always go through those peaks and valleys of growth. So it's just, how do we continue to keep you relevant as you grow through the process and you continue to grow your business year over year?
Well, thank you so much, Sacha, for giving me the time to pick your brain a little bit today. And especially when it's come to marketing, that's something that every business, it doesn't matter if you're big, small, medium, you need it. That's something you just need to spend money on.
Absolutely.
And be able to know that you don't have to break the bank to actually spend, to have marketing going on. I think it's an important thing. And a lot of people, when they hear marketing, they're like, oh, I need thousands of dollars. But in reality, like you said, it's not the truth. So I thank you so much for your valuable information, and then for allowing them to learn from you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Female Founders Podcast. That's it for this week's episode. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app or connect with us on womel.com so that you don't miss our next episode. See you next time. Bye for now.